see you. I'm Dee Plomassy, your special envoy here. Allow me to fill you in on the political subtleties of this lovely locale. My favorite thing about Canada? They became an independent country without ever going to war. In 1867, Canada changed from a British territory to a self-governing dominion by negotiating and communicating. That's right, they did it the smart way. Canada's capital is a lot like Canada. Big, beautiful and bilingual. Parts of Canada were settled by the English and other parts by the French. And ever since independence in 1867, English and French have been the two official languages. You'll hear them both every day in this town. We're not just in the capital here, we're also in Ontario, the most populous of Canada's provinces. More than 10 million people call Ontario home, and most live here in Ottawa, or in Toronto, Canada's largest city. I just love this city. Ottawa is named after a tribe who used to trade with the British soldiers posted here. It might have stayed a little outpost if England's Queen Victoria hadn't chosen to make it the capital back in 1857. After that, it didn't stay little for long. Here's Canada's Houses of Parliament. They look a lot like England's Parliament buildings, and the political system inside is based on England's too. The whole show is run by the head of the ruling party, the Prime Minister, who, by the way, is an old friend of mine. I'll see if I can get a tip or two for you. This big burner in front of Parliament is the Centennial Flame, lit in 1967 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Canadian independence. I've generated a lot of goodwill toward you here, so please, no roasting marshmallows. Goodbye! Hello, and welcome to Budapest. Let's explore. Budapest used to be two separate cities, Buda and Pest. Then in the 1840s, they were joined by this bridge across the Danube River. The chain bridge quickly became a symbol of Budapest. After it was destroyed in World War II, the city made sure to reconstruct the bridge just as its designer had originally created it, stone lions and all. Some symbols just can't be improved upon. Many different countries invaded Budapest over the centuries, so there are all different kinds of structures here, not just from different time periods, but using different regional styles too. A Turkish castle, a Roman fort, a Gothic church. A walk around town is a walk through the history of European architecture. If you think your Hungarian friends are different from your Czech, Polish or Russian friends, you're right. And here's why. Those neighboring countries were settled by Germanic and Slavic people. But Hungary was founded 1,000 years ago by Magyars, a nomadic tribe from Central Asia. Goodbye! So pleased to see you again. I'll be your host here in The Hague. Here's the Supreme Courthouse. It's just one of dozens of grand government buildings that line the streets of The Hague. The King and Queen of the Netherlands live in this neighborhood as well. They send their regards, by the way. For a long time, different parts of the Netherlands were controlled by kings, emperors, and armies from different parts of Europe. The country became independent in 1648, and it almost immediately became a great place to live. It had freedom of religion, good food, and a strong navy. In other words, the 17th century was the Dutch Golden Age. But if you ask me, it's still an A-plus country. People call this country Holland, but Holland is just a region of the Netherlands. Netherlands means Low Countries, and the name fits well. More than 40% of the land here is below sea level. Why isn't it under the North Sea? Because dunes and man-made walls called dikes keep the water from spilling over onto the land. The Prince Hendrik Monument honors the man who developed the Netherlands maritime industry. Ships, in other words. The Dutch became good at building ships, sailing them, and traveling the world. By 1700, Dutch colonies and trading posts dotted the globe from Java to India, from South America to Africa. Foreign relations are key, my friend. No nation ever got rich all by itself. The Hague is one of the Netherlands' two capitals, so national law is important here, but so is international law, because the International Court of Justice is here. When two countries have a dispute and they want to solve it through arbitration, they come to The Hague. It's such a civilized way for nations to behave. Goodbye!
Greetings, traveler. Enjoy tea for two in the United Kingdom.
Welcome to London, capital of the UK. Come along for the royal tour. Oddly enough, this beautiful English city was founded by Roman invaders in 43 AD. They built a walled city, made it their capital, and after they left, it stayed that way. Through hundreds of kings, queens, fires, wars, good times, and bad, the city grew. Now it's one of the biggest, richest cities on the planet. The lion is a favorite symbol in Great Britain, appearing on the Queen's crest, the Scottish flag, and in stone here in front of County Hall. This fellow may have seen your suspect, but it's no use asking. He's keeping a very stiff upper lip. Behind the lion is County Hall, 7 stories high, half a block long, and empty. Former Prime Minister Thatcher dissolved the local government 10 years ago, so its headquarters have been deserted ever since. London isn't all business and government. Entertainment reigns supreme here too, especially live theatre. From splashy musicals to the immortal classics, no city in the world offers more to see on stage. After all, this is where Shakespeare first produced all his plays. He knew a good audience when he saw one. Ah, Parliament. In Great Britain, this is the heart of government. Elected members in the House of Commons make laws. Aristocrats in the House of Lords debate laws. And the Prime Minister appointed by the majority party runs the show. The system has worked for about 500 years. Give or take a tyrant here and there, and a civil war or two. for clues around this clock tower, the biggest timepiece in Britain. Most people call the tower Big Ben, but that's a mistake. Big Ben is a bell inside the tower that chimes every hour. If you're still searching for clues when it rings, you're probably running late. Goodbye! Welcome to Vietnam. Join me and we'll see the sights. This is Hue, one of the few big cities in a very rural country. Most Vietnamese citizens are farmers, growing and harvesting rice in flooded fields called paddies alongside streams in the Mekong River Delta. Too bad you don't have time to peruse the paddies. The Vietnamese people have fought their fights for independence against other countries and even among themselves over how they should be governed. But that's history. When you visit today, people are friendly, open, and ready to help. They also have great cuisine, mountainous rainforests, and hundreds of miles of beautiful beaches. You might just be tempted to stay a while. For thousands of years, Hue was just a little village. But in 1802, Emperor Jialong of the Nguyen dynasty decided it was a perfect location. So he had craftsmen from all over the country create this, a smaller version of Beijing's imperial city. When you're an emperor, you can do that sort of thing. Emperor Bao Dai had this mausoleum built for the remains of his father, Emperor Kai Ding. Inside, it's truly amazing. Huge glass tile mosaics on the floor, and a big mural of a dragon in the clouds, painted on the ceiling by artists using their feet. Now that's one way to keep paint out from under your fingernails. Goodbye!
El vuelo 324 está a punto de salir para Cuba. Que disfrute del vuelo.
Hola! Let's explore the intriguing island of Cuba. Here's Castillo de la Punta, one of Havana Bay's huge Spanish fortresses. Of course, Cuba's been independent from Spain since 1899, but the country is still on the defensive. It's not exactly chummy with its non-communist neighbors in the Western Hemisphere. Isn't it sad how we focus on our differences but not on our similarities? See that huge statue on top of the marble temple next to Castillo de la Punta? That bronze horseman is none other than General Maximo Gomez, leader of Cuba's troops in their War of Independence from Spain. You might say he's the George Washington of Cuba. Here we are in Paseo de Martí, Martí Street if you don't speak Espanol. It's named for José Martí, probably the greatest hero of Cuban independence. Martí was a poet and writer whose works inspired readers to revolution. It just goes to show you, it's ideas that really change the world. Malecon Plaza along the beach, has a fascinating combination of modern buildings, ancient houses, and big flamboyant hotels from the 1950s, when Cuba was a gambling paradise for American tourists. The U.S. banned tourism to Cuba after the Communist Revolution of 1959. But Malecon is still a favorite hangout for many who love the sea. Here on Havana Bay is one of the biggest forts in the Caribbean, Morro Castle, built back in 1610 by the Spanish. Spain controlled Cuba on and off for almost 400 years, building huge fortresses like this one. They trusted big walls and big guns more than they trusted negotiation. Goodbye!
Buenos días. El vuelo 415 está llegando a Argentina.
Bienvenidos! Let me show you around Buenos Aires. It's quite a capital. The Plaza de Mayo. All the political players in Buenos Aires end up here, sooner or later. This plaza has seen thousands of rallies and demonstrations over the years. Any group with a point to make will assemble its supporters here, just to be sure the government won't ignore them. You'll find lots of info at the Cabildo National Historical Museum. Here's just a few historical highlights. Spanish explorers founded Buenos Aires in 1536. In 1810, the city was the first place in South America to elect its own government independent of Spain, although Argentina wasn't officially independent until 1816. From then on, well, as politics often does, it gets complicated. The Buenos Aires Municipal Palace is the seat of city government, and what a city it is! This huge cosmopolitan port is home to about a third of all Argentinians. They call themselves porteños. They're charming hosts, friendly, sophisticated, and helpful. What more could a visiting detective ask for? Here's Avenida 9 de Julio, July 9th Avenue. It's the widest city street in the world, so don't cross when the light is red. At the end of Avenida 9 de Julio is the Obelisco, a monument built in 1936 for the city's 400th anniversary. When it was new, the Obelisco was so unpopular that the city council voted to tear it down. They never got around to it though, so the monument still stands. Metropolitan Cathedral stands in Plaza de Mayo amidst government buildings. Here, unlike in the USA, religion and politics are allowed to mix. The Catholic Church helped craft Argentine independence and still influences politics today. Here's the Archbishop's office, a power spot, since most of Argentina's people are Catholic. Unlike other South Americans, very few Argentinians trace their ancestry back to native South American tribes. They're mostly the descendants of Spanish and Italian settlers, with French, German, and other European nationalities thrown in. Ah, yes, the Casa Rosada, home of the president. Through the years, there's been a lot of fighting over who gets to live in this pink house. Its most famous tenants were Army General Juan Perón, who became president in 1944, and his wife Eva, an actress who was hugely popular. She was known as Evita. Perhaps you've heard of her? Goodbye!
1916 сейчас отправляется в Россию.
Welcome to Moscow's Red Square, where political change is in the air. Moscow's Kremlin looms over most of Red Square. What's a Kremlin? A huge walled fortress. It includes dozens of individual buildings, palaces, churches, guard towers, museums and gardens. It was the home of the Tsars, and after the Communist Revolution in 1917, the seat of the Soviet government. Here's the Kremlin's newest addition, the Lenin Mausoleum. Vladimir Lenin led the Russian Revolution back in 1917. He always said he wanted to be buried in a simple grave, but obviously that didn't happen. Moscow's historical museum has an almost impossible job. Think of it. Russia covers a sixth of the planet, on 2 continents, and the people have lived under emperors, tsars, communist dictators, and the confusion of a brand new democracy. Amazingly, all that history is shown in one museum. I'm glad it's not my job. Across from the Kremlin stands GUM, Moscow's mega department store. Since communism ended, GUM has become a mall with lots of stores selling lots of different goods. Unfortunately, most of it is too expensive for the average Russian. Of all the amazing buildings in Red Square, St. Basil's Cathedral is the flashiest. Tsar Ivan the Terrible built it around 600 years ago. Since then, one poet compared it to an armored porcupine. Another called it an irregular fruit. When people ask me, I say one thing: wow! Goodbye! Ah, Sweden, my favorite diplomatic destination. Welcome! Right now we're in Gamla stan, or Old Town, the oldest part of Stockholm. Vikings built this walled town on Stadsholmen Island about 700 years ago. The walls came down long ago, and the city has spread out. But Gamla stan still has the feel of the Middle Ages to it, though I don't think it had nearly so many art galleries and cafes back then. Here's the Royal Palace, by far the biggest building in Gamla stan. It's been home to Swedish royals since Gustav III in 1754. With 700 rooms, it's huge, luxurious and ornate. And unlike most European palaces, it's open to the public. The Swedes are big on equality, and I guess that goes right to the very top. Sweden is famous for all the things I think are important: promoting peace, negotiating instead of fighting, and making sure everyone has a chance to live well. No wonder it's one of my favorite places. When I'm in Stockholm, here's where I stay, the Grand Hotel. It's more than 100 years old, and nothing else is nearly as elegant. Since the Royal Palace is right across the water, the view is positively regal. If your stay were a little longer, I'd book you a room. Stockholm started on an island and grew out to the surrounding seasides. When you're here, you're always close to water. Canals, rivers, Lake Mälaren and the Baltic Sea. If you had time, you could swim right in the middle of town or even fish for salmon. Stockholm citizens do both every day, if they're not busy traveling the globe like you. Goodbye!
أهلا عزيزي المسافر، أهلا بك في المغرب، أرض الغموض.
Welcome to Morocco. Join me for a stroll. Rabat isn't the biggest Moroccan city. That would be Casablanca. But Rabat is the capital. The king lives here, his government rules from here, and ambassadors from other countries stay here. It's just the place for a political player like myself. Rabat has many beautiful old buildings, but this is a beautiful new one, the Mosque of Mohammed V. He was the Sultan who freed Morocco from French occupation in 1956. A Vietnamese architect designed the tomb, and 400 Moroccan craftsmen built it. In a word, gorgeous. People called Berbers have lived here in Morocco since before history, but the place has been invaded and occupied by a lot of other folks. Romans, Arabs, Spanish, English, Portuguese, Germans, French. I guess they all liked the balmy location at the corner of the Atlantic and the Mediterranean. Who could resist? In 1146, the ruler Yaqub el-Hassan set out to build the biggest Islamic mosque in all of Africa. He died before it was done, and this is all that's left. The 140-foot Hassan Tower and a few walls. Even incomplete, it's still one of North Africa's most impressive pieces of religious architecture. Goodbye!